The big Batman news that we got this week was all about Clayface and apparently how he will be maybe not the main villain, but at least will be playing a big part in the Batman Part 2 starring Robert Pattinson, directed by Matt Reeves. And this is super duper exciting on many levels here. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to check out my video where I broke down this news when it initially came out. But it's really kind of interesting looking at this report because, first of all, this came from an article from Deadline, which, of course, one of the big trades in Hollywood. They don't just put information like this out there all willy-nilly. Like, they have actual sources. They only put out information if the studio allows them to. So it's accurate information. It's a good source. But it's just interesting how that is the part that people have latched onto the most, is that little, 2-sentence part of the whole article talking about how Matt Reeves has supposedly included Clayface in a big part of the script he's working on currently for the Batman Part 2. But that's not even what the article is about. The actual article of the headline is about how Mike Flanagan has pitched a Clayface solo movie to DC Studios. Not even Matt Reeves with his Batverse, but no, James Gunn and Peter Safran with the DCU. So it's kind of crazy that the Batman thing is the people take out of this, but nobody's talking about the fact that supposedly a Clayface movie is in development. Although no, it doesn't say that it's in development; it just says that he pitched it. But seeing this news and seeing people reacting to this news again, obviously him being in the Batman 2 is the big thing that people are talking about. But the people that I have seen mention this whole thing of Mike Flanagan doing a Clayface movie. One, say, okay, Mike Flanagan, great horror director, he would do a great Clayface movie. But two, why do we need a Clayface movie? So many people I saw the other day when this news came out just thinking it was such a stupid idea to do a Clayface movie and to do just solo movies about Batman villains. Because people, to be fair, they probably just look at what Sony has done with their Spider-Man villain movies and be like, oh, they're just going to pull another Venom and Morbius and Kraven the Hunter and El Muerto and Hypno Hustler and whatever else they're cooking up over there, and they're going to take these villains, give them their own solo movies, and make them into superheroes or anti-heroes or whatever. And just people are jumping to all these conclusions thinking it's such a stupid idea, but the idea of a Clayface solo movie is nothing new, guys, and I don't know why this is such suddenly a big terrible idea, because this is something we've known about for a while now, that the idea of a Clayface movie and other Batman villain solo movies has been in the works for a while now, and Matt Reeves himself is the one that is working on them. Because for those who don't remember, and I can't believe so many people forgot about this already, but last year, on October 17th, 2022, you can go and check out my video that I posted that day that this news came out. Again, it was a report coming from one of the big trades. I don't remember which one, Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, one of the big trades in Hollywood, put out this article, and it was talking about Batman villain solo movies being in development. So let's read the actual direct quote from the article for those of you guys that don't remember or don't believe that this is an actual thing, because it is an actual thing. So meanwhile, in Gotham City, filmmaker Reeves is quietly making his own expansion plans. Reeves is developing a sequel to his The Batman, which grossed a respectable $770.8 million worldwide when it was released in March. Already, a series spin-off focusing on Colin Farrell's Penguin is on its way to filming next year. But Reeves is plotting more. The filmmaker is meeting with writers and directors to build out movies. Yes, movies, not just series, focused on Batman Rogues Gallery, both established and more obscure, with characters ranging from the Scarecrow to Clayface to Professor Pig. All those projects are in the very early stages of gestation. So I don't know why this is suddenly such a big thing that people are freaking out about oh, a Clayface solo movie? That's a terrible idea. Guys, we already knew about this, and back then people were loving the idea. So I don't know why this is suddenly a big thing and people all of a sudden forgot that this was in development. But yeah, we're getting Batman villain solo movies, and I think it's a great idea because I trust Matt Reeves. I trust him enough to not be like Sony and not turn these characters into anti-heroes, because that's just stupid. And people need to understand that you can do a villain solo movie without turning them into a hero. Just look at Joker. I mean, literally any horror movie you look at, is the horror movie, like the murderer in those movies, are they heroes? No, they're murderers. They're horror movie villains. There's a reason for that. Literally, like horror movies with Batman villains as the star would be so cool, because some of these villains have such interesting backstories and origin stories that would make for a great horror movie. And especially if you do want them in this universe tied to Robert Pattinson's Batman, these characters that have these such in-depth stories deserve their own spotlight in their own movies, so that then when you do want them to face off against Robert Pattinson's The Batman, they'll already be developed. You already know who they are. You already know their motivations, where they came from, all that stuff. Personally, I think it's great ideas. And today we have a new update on these reports of Batman's solo movies for his villains being in development. So this is a report coming from the Mod Q stuff on the DCEU leaks Reddit subreddit page, and some of the stuff on this subreddit is in this Mod Q thing. It doesn't sound the most true, but this, I fully believe that it is true, because it just makes a lot of sense. So it talks about some of the big ones that we already talked about here, like with Clayface. Clayface, again, I've made many videos about this on the channel in the past. I think a Clayface solo movie would be great, especially if it is directed by Mike Flanagan, who really wants to do a Clayface solo movie. I mean, if Matt Reeves is willing to get a little bit more fantastical, I'm thinking maybe not go full on with the big mud monster. I mean, maybe for like the ending, and like I definitely want them to do it with the superpowers. I don't want it to just be the golden age Clayface that just runs around wearing a clay mask, because that's just stupid and kind of like takes away the specialness of this character. But a character who can shapeshift, a character who was an actor, he was at the height of his career. Suddenly that career started plummeting down. He became a washed up actor who didn't get work anymore. He got jealous of they're doing a reboot of a movie he starred in as the villain Clayface. So in at least in the Golden Age comics, that's when he dressed up as Clayface, that villain that he played in the movie, and went around murdering the cast of this new reboot. So they could do. I would love to see something inspired by that, because I think one of the most interesting aspects about Clayface Basil Carlo is that he was originally an actor, and that's why when he impersonates other people, that's why he's so good at it. But bring in that element of him shapeshifting and being able to transform into other people, and just like, I mean, especially doing like a Clayface horror movie, like the body horror of it would be one of the most interesting, coolest aspects of it. Like just his body just starts dripping apart. Like, just think about how terrifying that would be, but how cool it would be as well. Now, again, we don't know, is he going to be in the Batman Part 2? Apparently, he's being written into the scripts that Matt Reeves is working on right now. They could do both, though. Like I said, they could give him his own solo movie, set up the character, develop him, do his origin, and then he appears in the Batman Part 2. I'm going to make a separate video talking about who the villain, the main villain of the Batman Part 2 is going to be, because Clayface may be in the movie, but I don't think he's actually going to be the main villain. So stay tuned for that as well. Then we got Scarecrow, another character that it would make for a great horror movie villain. Jonathan Crane, of course, being a scientist, his relationship with his father was not the greatest. It was a bit of an abusive relationship, so you can deal with that. And then, of course, growing up, being obsessed with fear, trying to cure fear, and then embracing the fear and becoming the Scarecrow, the development of fear talking. There's a lot you could do with this character. And yes, we've seen him in live action plenty of times before. Batman Begins, he was on Gotham, great version on Gotham. He was in Titans, which was one of the worst live action villains I've ever seen. But Scarecrow is a great character, one of my favorite Batman villains. So I'd love to see a solo movie based around Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow. Then as for Professor Pig is not mentioned in this subreddit post. It's just mentioning Clayface, Scarecrow, and one other villain who we'll talk about in a second. But Professor Pig is not mentioned here, so I don't know if that means that maybe they're no longer doing the Professor Pig, because honestly, I think Professor Pig would be another great one. More of an obscure Batman villain, but honestly, one of the most terrifying Batman villains. I mean, this is a guy that runs around in a pig mask who keeps saying, "Oh, pig will make you perfect," and he like murders people and like puts pig heads on them, and it's weird. It's really weird, but I mean, I could totally see them making a movie about it. It'd be weird, but it'd probably be really entertaining and really, really terrifying. But the big one that this article, no, this subreddit post, this supposedly scoop leak slash thing, whatever you want to call it, is talking about is Poison Ivy. So supposedly a Poison Ivy movie is in development within the Matt Reeves The Batman universe, which, first of all, just that idea in general, I think kind of gets you thinking about how, Matt Reeves has made it very clear. He wants this universe to be very, very grounded. He wants to take maybe some of the fantastical elements and make them grounded. And a lot of people are not huge fans of that. That's why we're talking about with Clayface about like, oh, just doing the Golden Age version and not doing the big mud monster, which a lot of people were upset about, including myself. But just the fact that he wants to do a Poison Ivy movie, I think at least shows that he's willing to let loose a little bit, and he's not super duper strict about it has to be completely grounded. Like, I feel like he's willing to let loose a little bit on that, but a Poison Ivy movie in general, I think is a really interesting idea, because out of all the Batman villains, she's not one that I would have thought of as like, oh, this would be a good solo movie. But honestly, it would be, because the interesting thing about this report is when it says they're making a Poison Ivy movie in the Matt Reeves The Batman universe, it will supposedly be based on Rappaccini's Daughter, which is a gothic short story from 1844 or something like that, where basically in this story, I think his name was like George Rappaccini or something like that. He's a medical researcher, and he starts this garden of poisonous plants in his backyard in like some tropical area, and he raises his daughter to tend to this garden. And this garden, of course, being filled with all these poisonous plants, she eventually becomes immune to the poisons of this garden, but then herself also becomes poisonous to others around her. So I'm assuming, I haven't read the story, but I'm assuming like she becomes poisonous and then she probably ends up accidentally killing her father. I just think what a, terrible thing that would be to experience. I don't really know what her relationship is like with her father. But this would actually really make sense for this character. And apparently, Poison Ivy in Batman the Animated Series was supposedly based off of this story originally. Because whenever I was first reading this, I was like, Rappaccini's Daughter, what does this even have to do with Poison Ivy? Like, sure, it's similar, like, plants and poisons and stuff, but it makes sense. Like this would be, to fit it into the whole Matt Reeves universe, this does kind of sound like a grounded take on Poison Ivy, and kind of shifting away from the whole like, controlling plant stuff. Like, maybe that could still be part of an element here, but it just wouldn't be as hardcore as it is in some of the comics and other mediums, maybe like animation that we've seen in the past. So honestly, I think doing a Poison Ivy movie, especially based on this, would be really interesting. I don't really know how it would tie into, or if it would tie into eventually seeing Poison Ivy versus Robert Pattinson's Batman, but I think it'd be pretty cool. I think this would actually be a really, really interesting idea. And if this is supposedly something that's in development, as the original article from October said, is that Matt Reeves is looking at pitches from writers and directors for these Batman villain movies, these solo movies. I'm assuming that if they already have an idea for a Poison Ivy movie, that either Matt Reeves is just really passionate about this idea, or a director slash writer has pitched this idea, Matt Reeves is into it, and it's now something they're developing. So, interesting. And this is the only one that there's actual details about too. The Scarecrow and the Clayface one, it just says, Clayface movie, Scarecrow movie. And also it does note though that the Clayface part of this, about a Clayface movie being in development, this was brought up weeks prior to the Deadline report about Mike Flanagan wanting to do a Clayface movie. So really, really interesting stuff going on here. I think this is exciting. I love the Batman. I really love what Matt Reeves is setting up with this whole universe, doing his own thing with these Batman characters, really exploring Gotham, each and every single one of these villains, these heroes, everybody. I think it's a great idea. I think, doing these villain solo movies, it doesn't have to be like Sony did it. It doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to be cheesy. They don't have to become anti-heroes or whatever. It can just be a good old horror movie. But then as for the Poison Ivy one, I think that could be, Poison Ivy in the comics is never really like a full-on villain. She's just all about the plants and like prioritizing plants over human beings. But I mean, you could get pretty dark with that as well. So anyways, guys, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about this news, or at least these reports, that we are indeed getting Batman villain solo movies set within the Matt Reeves The Batman universe? What do you think about these three specifically? Scarecrow, Clayface, and Poison Ivy, maybe Professor Pig as well, since that was initially reported also. And if this does end up being a thing, what other Batman villains would you also like to see get solo movies, or possibly even HBO Max series set within the Matt Reeves The Batman universe? So thanks so much for watching. Please drop if you enjoyed this video and hit the subscribe button so I can keep you up to date on everything that goes on in the DC life.